Thanks, Glenn. I also decided to be the technical troublemaker, and apparently my slides did not download from Google Slides correctly. So I will be peering over my shoulder a little bit, so please give me some little patience there. So as Jillian mentioned, I'm Karen Estlund. I'm really excited to talk today to you all about newspapers. So why newspapers? So one of the great things about newspapers, periodicals, serials is that we get to deal with mass media. So there's a huge audience for newspapers out there. Just a little bit of an example of some of the newspaper digital sites around the world, comparing this to when I did this presentation last year in DC. Despite the different units, issues, pages, etc. The growth in 1 year in these online newspaper resources is between 15 and 47% in content. So newspaper content is continually being added at a quick pace in our digital collection environment. Also, they're very popular, being popular media, and so you'll find that newspapers actually have about 6 times the amount of views that our other digital content has as well. So, yay, newspapers. So when I want to talk about newspapers, I usually like to look at something that I'm personally interested in and researching, or just really as part of my lifestyle. So since I moved to Pennsylvania, I have started making sauerkraut. And when I was 5, I used to sneak into the kitchen and drink the juice out of the sauerkraut jar and then put it back. And this is especially important because Simeon Warner, one of the IIIF editors, him and I collaboratively made that sauerkraut there on the far left. So very good for IIIF. So in our newspapers in Pennsylvania, we have a newspaper called the Lancaster Farming, which is still run today. Our Pennsylvania Extension Service, where we are actually required to support agriculture in the state, publishes articles through this newspaper. So as you can see, here is a recipe and directions for making sauerkraut. Then I wanted to show front page news is the price and weight of sauerkraut in 1851 in a rural town in Pennsylvania, and you will find sauerkraut listed on tons of front pages in this is hot news, is how much is it gonna cost to get sauerkraut in Pennsylvania in the 19th century. And moving on, this is a great story about sauerkraut for health benefits. So I'm sure you all are familiar with the modern health crazes on gut health. Well, guess what? We've been talking about gut health for a long time. And here's an article from a 1840 newspaper and actually talking about sauerkraut as curing some children who had scurvy. So please make sure you have your sauerkraut in addition to your water here so that no one gets scurvy. And then this is one of my favorites from the National Library of Wales, our Welsh friends and colleagues. If someone tragically dies in your house, a friend or family member, it is very, very important that you shake your sauerkraut at the exact time the body leaves the house, or it will go bad. So as you can see, there's all sorts of different representations of how these things are important, and through IIIF, you can bring them together. So why are we really looking at this for cereals? Well, you've seen a lot of the things already, but newspapers, what do we love? We love coordinates, we love grids, right? So you can have an article. If you just want to zoom in on an image of an article, you can pull that out as well. This is a great example of just zoom and pan, and those are some apples, which you'll see in a second. Newspapers with OCR converted to annotations and having web annotations and using the search API. I think this is one of the best uses with serials and newspapers you'll find is using the image API, the presentation API, and the search API so that you can search the text within the objects as well. Oh, and I should mention, because we were talking about health, apparently this article from the National Library of Wales talks about a dissertation from the 16th century from a German scientist. It's supposed to be really good and talk about how it'll cure everything. So comparison, right? Here are 2 recipes for how one makes sauerkraut. This is from the North Carolina State Library's collections, the agricultural extension cereals. And one of the things that's really important to note, what changed between 1910 and 1980 in the instructions of making sauerkraut, is that in 1910, you let it ferment for 4 weeks. In 1980, 10 days. So I'm not sure what's going on with the chemistry there. They have the same temperature, but flavors and changes and taste. So just seeing how things have evolved over time. Annotations is context and commentary, right? So this is not cabbage. I searched for sauerkraut and I got apples. So I needed to label this as not cabbage. We can do all sorts of tagging and coding, and we can have those in open annotations and with different link data as well. Discourse and presentation, representation across time. One of the things that I often like to talk about when we look at newspapers, we're really looking at culture writ large. So what does it mean when most of the sauerkraut articles are for the women folk and in those sections of the paper? So you can do some really interesting research on representation through that across time, across geographies as well. Oh, I'm flying. Okay, so I really want to talk about the IIIF community and the group, make a pitch like everyone else up here. We are having our meeting on Thursday morning. A couple things that are really good from the group goals is we're looking at best practices. We're trying to figure out what the possibilities are to exploit these different APIs and to share and demo things together. We have done a IIIF mapping from a traditional newspaper hierarchy, so you can easily map your issues to manifests. Our best practice guide is something that I'm very proud of that we started working on in a IIIF meeting a couple years ago, and we'll be moving it into version 3.0, because instead of, I know everyone in this room loves reading API specs. That's why you're all here. They're very exciting, right? You can go through. But really what we found when we were talking to users is they were like, well, why would I use this API? Or why would I use this optional part of the presentation API? So we have formed our best practices to really say, this is what you want to do, then here's what you would use, and point to those sections in the API documents. So that's something that we've worked pretty hard on. Our activities coming up, we are really going to work on the 3.0. We've been working very hard with vendors. I am very happy, proud, two of our sponsors, OCLC and Veridian, both big newspaper content providers, have IIIF enabled now. So with them and other open source options, we pretty much have almost all the newspaper software community covered with IIIF enabled capabilities. So this is really exciting. We are working on the text granularity group, which you'll hear more about this week, and trying to figure out, okay, if you have those annotations and you want to edit them, are you be talking about a line edit, a word, or a paragraph, and what does that mean? Oh, sorry, I was on the wrong slide. All right, so what I wanted to leave you all with is thinking about newspapers and culture is political. And so we have all of these great digitized manuscripts, great newspapers we're looking at, and what does it mean if it doesn't affect life today? So back to that article on scurvy, this is an article about children whose health was doing really poor due to emigration, and I think in the US right now, as we think about emigration and the status of what people are, we need to look back at our history, we need to connect across time, and clearly everybody needs to eat sauerkraut so they're healthy. So with that, thank you.